let's talk the 10 essentials. But before I deep dive and show you what it is that I bring and what my essentials kit looks like, I want to share a story with you. So I'm sitting in front of my little off-grid cabin, which is a 2-mile hike into the national forest. Now, my cabin is part of the Bobcat Fire Recovery Burn Zone. So it's actually closed to the public, but I am required to hike in because I do need to deal with tree fall. I need to deal with brush clearance. I'm still required to adhere to the lease of the land that I have. So I want to tell you about one particular day that I decided to come into my cabin. It wasn't a day I'd planned to come in. I'd gotten off work. I had all of these supplies because I was planning on doing a little bit of restoration in the coming days. And I just thought, you know what? I've got 4 hours of light. It's a beautiful bluebird day. I think I'm just going to quickly hike into my cabin, bring some of that gear with me and supplies that I need, just drop it off and then hike back out. It'll be no more than 2.5 hours. Hike in, hike out. So park at the trailhead, hike in, get to my cabin, offload everything. And not more than 10 minutes of me being at my cabin, all of a sudden the wind kicks up. And we're not talking just mellow wind. We are talking 30+ mile an hour winds that technically were gale force winds. And I'm a little worried because I'm thinking, holy Toledo, like I shouldn't be in the canyon right now with these winds because trees are falling, landscape is changing. I gotta get out of here. So I lock the cabin up and I hike really, really quickly out of the canyon. And I'm no further than 5 or 7 minutes down the canyon. I'm at the narrowest part of the canyon and there's these beautiful alder trees and those alders are starting to creak and they're starting to sway and they're starting to bend. And I start hearing a sound that I've never ever heard before. But the minute I heard it, I knew exactly what it was. One of those alders had bent past the point of where it could hold itself up and it broke. I heard this creaking and snapping, and sure enough, I turn around and this giant 100-foot tree that's a couple of 100 feet away from me falls and takes down 3 other trees. So now I've got 4 trees that have collapsed and fallen down. The wind is kicking up and all that debris comes into my face. And I literally can't see because I've got all this debris in my face. So I'm trying to get the debris out of my mouth and get the debris out of my eyes. And all of a sudden I hear this noise. I hear an animal running straight towards me because I'm at a high point on the trail. And that was really the only way to get out from this grove of alders. And I open my eyes and I look and it's this giant, beautiful buck with a full rack of antlers heading straight towards me up the trail. As soon as I see it, I literally rotate my body so I'm up against the canyon wall. The buck sees me and it goes down by the creek bed. And I turn around and look and another tree about 30 feet from me also breaks, bends, and falls. So I'm going to pause that story right there because there were a couple things that I didn't do. One, I never checked the weather. Had I checked the weather, I would have known that we had a high wind warning and we had gale force winds that were coming, and I never would have gone into the canyon. 2, because it was a spontaneous trip, I didn't let the ranger know that I was actually coming into my cabin that day. So he would have had no idea if I was there for a day, 3 days, 5 days, in and out. He would never have known if something had happened to me, if a tree had landed on me, if I'd gotten injured, broken a leg. I didn't have any of my 10 essentials, and I really want to go over what my 10 essentials are, and I want to impress upon you the importance of these essentials. I didn't even have a canyon radio with me, and I didn't have any sort of location beacon that I could have alerted search and rescue on. And that is the reason for these 10 essentials. It's not because you are going to use them, it's in case you have to use them. So I like to break my essentials down into categories. So the first is finding your way. The second is for an emergency. Then there's for your protection. And those are really the 3 primary categories. So finding your way, your map and compass. This is always really key. And we're going to go into how to use your map and compass and basic orienteering on the last part of the booklet. Also part of that finding your way, I like to think of my illumination as my headlamp. Now, I don't just bring my headlamp. I also bring batteries because I may be out more than a day and I might not have changed my batteries in a little bit, but I know that I'll have extra batteries. And I mark these at the beginning of the calendar year so I know when to change them out and when to get new batteries. So that's finding your way, navigation and illumination. Then I've got for an emergency. And think about things like your first aid kit. Within my first aid kit, I also have period supplies. These can also double for extra bleeding, things like that. I'm not going to go into first aid deeply with you, but this is for first aid. Then I like to think of fire. So if I ever needed to have a fire starter kit, I've got waterproof matches, I've got my ferricium rod. I also do keep a lighter, but I tend to rely on these two things a little bit more because I have had my lighter fail by keeping it too long into my kit. And then I also have some sort of fire starter. And in this case, I have just cotton balls that I've dipped in Vaseline. And if I were to light it, this would actually burn for 1 to 2 minutes and it would help me start a small fire. Now, bear in mind, you want to make sure that you're in a safe zone. The day that I'm talking about, I would never ever have started a fire because of the winds, but it's something in case of an emergency and I need it. Also, think about your first aid kit. So think about any repairs that you need to do. I have a tiny little pocket knife. I also have safety pins, and I have some really, really thick waxed thread, and I've used this to repair jackets, to repair boots, to repair tents. So think about that as well. And then lastly, think about some sort of emergency shelter. In the story that I told you, if for any reason I had gotten injured, I would have at least had an emergency shelter to shelter in place with for the night if I couldn't get out of the canyon. So think about that for an emergency. The next thing I like to think about is for your protection. So that would be things like sunblock. I also think of protection. This isn't listed on my list, but this is what I bring. I always bring some sort of bug spray. And that being said, I always bring a bug mask, a net for bugs, because they protect me from being bitten, getting bugs inside of me, that sort of thing. Another thing when you think about protection, I also bring hand warmers. Sometimes it's really, really cold out and little extra hand warmers help. Think about extra food as well. I keep extra power bars with me. I don't eat them. I do change them out, but I have them in case I need to stay an extra night someplace. I don't plan on being out on the trail overnight, but that's what this extra is for. So I have nutrition. And then I always bring extra water with me. If I'm by a creek, I will have a filtration system with me. And I usually will have some iodine tablets as well and a bandana for filtering. So that way I can go ahead and drink any water source too. And when I think of protection as well, think about lip balm and think about sunglasses. So that's also really important when you think of that extra protection. And then you want to think about your layering system. So the things that I will bring a down jacket. I will bring a vest. I will also bring a rain layer. And what I love about these things is they all fold up really, really small and they don't take up a lot of room. But if I ever got caught in a very windy, wet, rainy situation, I would have all of the protection that I would need to stay the night safely. Now, if I'm backpacking, I will have most of this with me, just in general. But if I'm training or conditioning or day hiking or going someplace where I'm just going in and out for the day, this is really, really important. It's also not just important for you. It's important if you're with a group. It's important if you see someone else on the trail. I've actually assisted other people that have needed nutrition, needed water, needed food, needed extra layers, were a little hypothermic. And I had these things to actually kind of help get them back on their feet. And I know that seems like a lot, but this really compacts And this extra stuff weighs about 4 pounds with the exclusion of what that water weight's a little bit heavier. But for 4 extra pounds in my pack, I know that I will be safe in any situation if I do need to stay an extra night that I wasn't planning on, or end up someplace on the trail and having to stay where it was just not part of what the plan is. And that is really what those 10 essentials are for. They're not because you're planning on having something happen. They're in case something abrupt happens, in case maybe you sprain an ankle, maybe someone else in your group is getting sick, maybe weather comes in and you simply can't move. But the one thing I do want you to remember, which is my 11th essential, no matter what happens, remember to just try to smile, because when you wear a smile, it makes those unexpected things, you're able to ground a little bit, and you're able to just enjoy or walk through whatever's happening a little bit better. So these are my 10 essentials. This is why it is so important, and I hope I've impressed upon you, showing you what my essentials are. You can always adapt. You noticed I did have a few extra things in there that were essentials for me. So you're going to find what's essential for you on top of this list. So make that, add to the list, add to that checklist that I've given you, so you can refer back to what makes sense for you. And this kit might change if I'm snowshoeing in the wintertime, if I'm backpacking. I will have extra things on top of this depending on what the weather is going to be like too. So remember, always check the weather. Remember, bring your essentials. Remember to let someone know where you are. Oh, and the one other thing that I didn't mention is I really want you to consider some sort of location beacon. This is something that is a two-way communicator. It's got an SOS button on it. So if something did happen to myself, if I'm by myself, or also if I'm with a group and we're having an emergency scenario where I really need search and rescue to come, I have a way to communicate that if I'm out in the backcountry. So think about something like that as well. It's really important. It's also important for loved ones. I do a lot of solo stuff, and it lets my loved ones be able to know, when I get to camp, I just say, hey, beautiful hike in at camp, can't wait to, just curl up in my sleeping bag and enjoy a good night's sleep. So this is a good way for people to also know that I'm okay, because, loved ones do kind of want to make sure that you're good too. So I will see you again. Think about your 10 essentials and think about what it is that you want to bring with you.